A monument says, "At least I got this far," while a footprint says, "This is where I was when I began moving again." There's a proverbial wisdom in this quote by William Faulkner. I want you to think about it. Because so often we are busy building monuments, trying to say to the world, "I made it this far." But Christians, rather than being monument builders, should be people of the footprint. This is where I was when I began moving again. Many things can cause us to stop moving. Our lives end up in what feels like a full stop. I was recently at a conference and I heard a panel on those who are in public health and in higher ed and elected officials, and they described the incredible pressure that these folks are under. Incredible pressure to be experts, to never be wrong, and to never make a mistake. And incredible pressure can bring us to a full stop in our lives, where we close ourselves off from others. We complain, we blame others for our misery. Sickness, death, financial trouble. Ecclesiastes says even much study can become a weariness to the flesh. All these things can stop us in our tracks. And it's in those moments we look at our surroundings and we come to the conclusion that we desperately need something to be different. And our problem is, I don't like the person I am, and I don't like the people that I'm around. But the big idea is this: to be a different kind of person, you must travel to a different kind of place. To be a different kind of person, you have to travel to a different kind of place. And that's what these Psalms are all about. These Psalms are to help us travel into God's presence. And this first Psalm of Ascent is like an invitation. It's the awakening that it's time to start moving again, to begin the pilgrim journey. It's a psalm from someone who became self-aware and self-critical, who gained the wisdom that comes from self-knowledge and knowledge of God. This psalm, according to Eugene Peterson, using that William Faulkner footprint, he says this psalm is a footprint. It's not a monument. A monument says, "At least I got this far." A footprint says, "This is where I was when I began moving again." So this morning, if you have looked at your surroundings and said, "I'd like to be a different kind of person. I've stayed here and stayed this way too long," then come and travel with these ancient pilgrims in Psalm 120. And we're going to start this journey to a different kind of place when we look at the description of distress, the wearying woe, and the sane solution. So let's start with the psalmist's description of distress. The psalmist is in distress. List in your head, just think about this, the last 3 times that you were in distress. And think about, what was it like? On the one hand, there are physical symptoms of mental or emotional distress, right? Did you toss and turn in bed, unable to sleep? Did your resting heart rate rise until you could hear your heartbeat in your ears? Were your shoulders tight? Was there a knot in your stomach? Those are physical symptoms of mental or emotional distress. Now, on the other hand, there are mental or emotional symptoms of physical distress. When your body is in pain, you can find your thoughts racing or have a manic anxiety as your mind bounces from one worry to the next. Or on the flip side of that, physical pain can lead to depression, a foreboding sense of hopelessness, a boredom with life, a feeling of what's the point in anything, or even feelings of worthlessness. Do you recognize when you're in distress, or do you just press on and accept it as normal? Hey, that's life. The psalmist, here in verse 1, names it, "In my distress." But in his distress, what did he do? He tells us something very simple in the same verse. I called to the Lord, and he answered me. The simplest description of worship is to call on the Lord. The Bible's first description of worship is at the end of Genesis 4. There it says, at that time, men began to call on the name of the Lord. This psalm is a song of worship. It's a prayer. It's talking to God. It says that when I am in distress, I will call out to you because I trust you to answer, because I know you see me. You see the situation that I'm in. But how will God answer? Well, let's look at the rest of the psalm, and we're going to return to that question. The nature of the psalmist's distress is given in verse 2. He says, deliver me from lips of falsehood and a tongue of deception. And we can relate, can't we? I mean, most of us, sadly, we have experienced the products that come from a factory of lies. It seems like it's a supply chain that never is blocked. Lie after lie comes off the assembly line and it's delivered to your doorstep. And as quickly as you open one package, another is delivered. Where is this factory? It's a factory that has its address right below your nose and right above your chin. The lips are the factory of a liar. There's an old joke that military people tell each other because military recruiters are pegged as promising, over-promising great things for people who sign on the dotted line and join up. The joke is, how can you tell a recruiter is lying? Their lips are moving. But if the lips are the factory, then where is the corporate office of lies? The tongue. The tongue that intends to deceive another. But here's the question. Whose deceitful tongue is the psalmist talking about in verse 2? Is it deliver me from lying lips and the deceitful tongue of my enemies, those people out there? Or is it deliver me from my own lying lips and my own deceitful tongue? Or is it both? I wonder how you first heard it when we read the psalm. Did you think he was talking about himself or someone else? If you were singing this psalm, what would it be for you today? Deliver me from those liars out there, or deliver me from the lying lips that are connected to my own face, or maybe a bit of both. Whether it's my tongue or another's, what is the psalmist's judgment of this in verses 3 and 4? He asks another question. What shall be given, or what shall be done to you? In other words, what is the punishment that such a tongue deserves? And he gives us two images. One is that this tongue should be shot through with a warrior's sharp arrows. That's the ancient version of the firing squad, right? Open fire until the arrows make this tongue look like a full pincushion. It's a picture of death. The other image is the tongue being slow roasted by the glowing coals of the broom tree. One commentator I read said that the broom tree was the kind of wood in the ancient world that was burned down to make coal, the coal that was put into the forge to stoke a fire so hot that that metal could be melted and shaped by it. It's a picture of hell. So the pictures he gives us are death and hell. That's what lying lips and a deceitful tongue deserve. So now that question of whose lying lips we're talking about has much higher stakes. Yes, your enemy's lying lips deserve death and hell. But so also does your own deceitful tongue. This is a full description of distress. But let's turn to look at the wearying woe of verse 5. The psalmist describes a wearying woe to give us a fuller picture of his situation. In verse 5, he says, Woe! Woe to me that I sojourn in Meshech, that I dwell among the tents of Kedar. And three obvious questions come to our minds reading this. One, where are Meshech and Kedar? Two, what's it like there? And three, who all lives there? So where is it? It seems like both of these locations would be near to each other if the psalmist is in both of them. But while there is a Kedar near Israel, the only known Meshech in the ancient geography is miles away in a deserted part of what is now modern-day Turkey. So the short answer is we aren't completely sure which locations the psalmist is talking about. But we do know that the psalmist is a foreigner there because he says he's sojourning. It's not his permanent home. Well, what's it like there? The psalmist describes it as woe. Woe is me that I live here. How long has he lived there? Too long, he says in verse 6. But who is it that lives there with him? Who are the people in this place where he's traveling? He describes them with one phrase: they hate peace. Those are strong words. The psalmist is complaining about where he lives, and to any complaint like this, no matter where Meshech is, there are some common ways that people will respond to such a complaint. Some people will respond, well, man, how could you ever live in Meshech? What a terrible place. If you live there, then you deserve your woe. Have you ever complained about the situation you find yourself in and had someone tell you, well, you chose it? It leaves you thinking, how did I ever get in this situation? What's wrong with me? Now others will respond, Meshech, what a great place. Why would you ever leave there? Why would anyone call it woe to live in Meshech? So have you ever complained about your situation and had someone tell you, what are you complaining about? You've actually got it great. It leaves you thinking, is it really so bad here? It causes you to question your own judgment. And neither of these responses that people give are helpful, right? They leave the psalmist stuck in his own head. Has that ever happened to you? Do you find yourself somewhere stuck in your own head, wondering whether you deserve to be in the situation you're in, even if it's an unhealthy one, or wondering if you're the one off base? I don't know, maybe this isn't so bad. It is no fun to be stuck in your own head. But when you recognize your distress, like the psalmist here does, you have an opportunity to make a change. Why is this situation a cause of woe? Why is it so bad to live in Meshech and Kedar? While the psalmist doesn't give us exact details, it's not hard to infer. I see calamity, and now I'm part of making calamity. And this is what I mean. We asked, whose lying tongue? Well, 1 Corinthians 15:33 says this: bad company corrupts good character. The psalmist, living among liars, is becoming a liar himself. The one who listens to dirty jokes begins telling dirty jokes, at first just in your mind, but then to others. The honest person on a team of cheaters becomes a cheater themselves. That's what happens if we stay too long in a bad situation. I see calamity, and now I'm part of making calamity. The psalmist recognizes he's been in this situation too long. Too long have I had my dwelling among those who hate peace. If I choose to stay any longer, then I may begin to hate peace. But here's the scary thought that plagues us. What do I lose if I leave here? And will it be worth it if I make that journey? The fear kicks in, and we may pump the brakes. We may even come to a full stop. We may even think to build a monument in this moment. Hey, at least I got this far, and that should be good enough, don't you think? But if you build a monument like that, it'll be a monument to what we used to be. Because what happens if we stay? I see calamity, and now I'm a part of making calamity. It's not a question of what do I lose if I leave here. Rather, what parts of my soul will I lose if I stay? So we have to find some kind of sane solution to all of this. And the sane solution comes as the psalmist becomes self-aware and self-critical. He has what John Calvin called true wisdom, which is knowledge of God and knowledge of self. Like on the one hand, the psalmist is self-critical in verse 6 when he realizes he's stayed still too long. It's time. It's time to get moving again. And he's self-aware in verse 7 when he realizes he's for peace, but his neighbors are for war. And this is what's going to get him moving again. This is what's going to get us moving again. When our lives come to a standstill, we have to answer this question: who am I? What a beautiful answer the psalmist gives. Who am I? I'm for peace. And you might say, well, who's not for peace, right? Well, I mean, who really can say that? I'm for peace. Are you for peace? It would be terrible to say I'm not for peace. But it is a wise answer. Who am I? I need to look at myself. Whatever the calamity of the psalmist's situation, he knows that in his heart he is a man of peace. Can you and I say that about ourselves? I am for peace. Do our words and our actions show it? The psalmist answered another important question: where shall I go? He goes to the Lord. He sings his prayer. Now, how do we know he's answering, where shall I go? Because it's a Psalm of Ascent, right? The title that says it's a Psalm of Ascent, and because the first person that he cries out to is the Lord. He says, that's the direction I've got to get headed in. Too long have I been in this place. I need to go to that place. I need to ascend. Where is the place to which he will ascend? He's going to ascend to Jerusalem. What's Jerusalem? It's the capital city of God's people. What's in Jerusalem? The temple of the Lord, the physical symbol of God's presence right in the middle of his chosen people. I've got to get out of this place and travel to that place. I've got to get from this place where I'm far from the presence of the Lord and get to the center of the place where I'm in the presence of the Lord, in and around and among his people, and sing this song as I travel. What will happen when the psalmist presents himself there? Will he hear questions? Oh, where have you been? Oh, you were in Meshach? Well, you better get cleaned up before you come in here. He might think that. Will he question his worthiness to enter into God's presence? I thought I was a man of peace, but I lived so long among those who are for war. I thought I was a man of truth, but I realize my lips and my tongue are as guilty as theirs. When the lying tongue comes into God's presence in worship, will he find sharp arrows aimed at him? Will he find coals of a fire made hot for him? Here's the place where we have to ask and answer this question: how does God answer the psalmist? The fulfillment of this psalm is in the truth of God's Son, Jesus Christ. How do I know that? Because Jesus Christ is the divine warrior, the one who has the right to aim the arrows at the tongue, but who himself had the arrows of God's wrath pointed at himself on the cross, that he would take the arrows of judgment on himself for our lying tongue. It's a great exchange. What the deceitful tongue deserved, Jesus received in order that we might have peace. Jesus is the fulfillment of this psalm. He is the ultimate man of peace. He came and lived among us, who more often than we'd like to admit actually hate peace when we look and judge by our words and actions. But it didn't change him to come and live among us the way it changes us when we live among those who are for war. Instead, Jesus, when he comes and lives among us as a man of peace, changes us by the blood of his cross. The record of wrongs against us is nailed to his cross, and we're covered by his blood. Jesus took the warrior's arrows. Jesus face the fire of hell. Jesus is the man of peace who is not changed when he walks among those who are for war. Jesus is the fulfillment of this song for you. And when you find yourself a weary traveler, you want to travel in the direction of worshiping God's true temple. No longer do we worry about making a trek across the world and landing in Jerusalem. But because Christ has risen and ascended and sits at the right hand of the Father, his presence is with us wherever we are. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, Jesus is there in the midst of them. And we become a temple of living stones, gathered in the presence of the worship of God, to have his Holy Spirit work in and through us to become peacemakers, to become truth tellers, to become truth livers. People who live truth. I know, it sounded better on paper. So as we close, remember this description of distress. We have to name our situation and realize we need help. Maybe you're facing a wearying woe. We have to describe our situation in order to become self-aware and self-critical, and we need to find the sane solution. We have to go to God, who knows us and our situation, and we have to find peace in the true man of peace, Jesus Christ. He's the one who calls you. He's the one who says, where are you traveling, spiritually speaking? Where are you going? Stand up. Leave a footprint. This is where I was when I began moving again. I began moving until my feet stood at the foot of his cross and I received his grace. Is that you this morning? If it's not, you're invited on this journey. If it is, keep journeying in him. Let's pray.